All right, this right here is fun to do. We've got a baby in the audience again today. She always likes Vita Vea shows. I think Vita Vea is Savannah Lombardi's favorite player. This right here, though, from the Bucks uniform to the 49ers uniform. The 49ers have been one of the teams to have inquired with Tampa Bay about the 347-pound defensive tackle. So we now have confirmed 49ers interest. I think it was obvious a couple weeks ago that the 49ers would be interested in one of the unicorns in the NFL. Again, somebody who's 350 pounds but can also rush the passer. That is a unicorn. Also, Vita Vea wants to be traded to a California team, and the 49ers play their football games and have their HQ 6.5 miles away from where he went to high school. So the 49ers, the Bears, and the Bills, according to Mike Garafolo, have been amongst the teams who have called Tampa Bay on Vita Vea. Now, the Bucks are currently saying we do not want to trade this guy. However, they could just be saying that because the defensive tackle market has absolutely exploded. Here's a look at the APYs at the top of the defensive tackle market, and I strategically cut this off at Vita Vea down here all the way, number 15? I would have to count to see exactly where, but there's a lot of defensive tackles above him in terms of average per year. He's at $17.75 million. We recently have seen Quinnen Williams sign a contract worth $35.3 million to edge out Jeffrey Simmons, the Titans defensive tackle, who just practiced and played against the 49ers, and in Jalen Carter at the very top at $38 million. So Vita Vea, entering the final year of his contract, wants to be paid way more than $18 million per year. The question then is if he is traded to a team that he wants to play for, probably closer to his family, and the 49ers would be the closest of all to his family, how much money would he demand? Because Vita Vea is not being traded anywhere without agreeing to a contract extension. Is he going to be happy with the mid-20s, the upper 20s, or does he want to be in the $30 million range? And if that's the case, well, then that would be a significant swing for the 49ers financially for somebody on the wrong side of 30. But Vita Vea is still playing high level football. Again, do you guys want to see him in a Bucks jersey, or do you want to see him in the 49ers jersey? We got the Bucks jersey here, 49ers jersey there. Found both of those on X. Look, we could keep him in Niners jersey for now. Imagine this in the middle of the 49ers defense. They already saw some solid defensive tackle play in that first preseason game. I thought it was really exciting to see Gracen Halton. Thought it was really exciting to see Sebastian Valdez and how he performed. I mentioned after that game that maybe Alfred Collins won't be a great fit with what Raheem Morris is running, but I think the jury is still out on that. I want to see Alfred Collins play another game with a little bit more conditioning under his belt. He's coming off of that shoulder surgery, and he was only in practice about a week before that preseason opener against the Tennessee Titans. So the question for the 49ers is, what kind of body types do you want at defensive tackle to best complement the edge rushers and the fever backs and the hybrid 4-3-3-4 that you're going to run? When you talk about somebody like Vita Vea, he's such a unicorn that he fits in any system. And I think he'd be a dream fit for a hybrid system like the 49ers one, again, because he's 350 pounds. He can clog the middle as a run stopper, but he can also give you a pass rushing presence. He's been second in pressures to only Dexter Lawrence over the past 2 years. And in every single season that Tampa Bay has had with Vita Vea since they drafted him out of Washington in 2018, they've had a top 5 run defense. And that's not a coincidence. That is very related to having the big man in the middle. I want to, use this as an opportunity to analyze the 49ers defensive tackle position a little bit more closely, because I think then we can understand where exactly they are right now in the transition to Raheem Morris. Where somebody like Vea would fit, that obviously would be a dream addition, I think, for a lot of 49ers fans. But I think just understanding of where San Francisco currently is a good opportunity to hop on right now, as we know that they have called Tampa Bay about Vita Vea. Anyway, Alfred Collins played with the first team the other day, was washed out by J.C. Latham, who's the Tennessee right guard on a number of plays. Remember, the Titans scored a touchdown. We saw Tony Pollard on that opening drive. I thought Alfred Collins did not look good for the 49ers. I would say that anybody who watches tape would agree with me that he doesn't look good, but I think there are some mitigating factors, including the fact that he was coming off of the shoulder surgery and had only been back at practice for about a week plus. Osa Odighizuwa obviously did not play. As you guys might hear Savannah Lombardi in the background. The live audience here is enjoying the show, but I think our mic is so good that maybe give me a thumbs up if you hear, a thumbs down if you don't. She's making some high-pitched noises right now. Anyway, we're going to talk about Osa Odighizuwa, player that she probably likes. Traded to the 49ers from the Dallas Cowboys. Osa is someone who is immediately going to boost the 49ers pass rush. I mean, he had over 50 pressures by himself last year, and the 49ers only had 56 total out of all of their defensive tackles. So somebody like Collins is in there to stop the run and develop into a pass rusher. Problem is, he wasn't stopping the run for the 49ers in week one. Once they do see Osa, probably a little bit this next week, for sure in week 3 of the preseason, then for sure in week 1 of the regular season against the Rams in Australia, you're going to have a very, very added pass rushing presence. Gracen Halton, the rookie. We should probably shade Gracen Halton in green, just like we shade all rookies. Let's get that highlight in. Good. All right, so Gracen Halton, the way that he played the run the other day was, I think, tremendously encouraging. He was obviously awesome against the pass. We saw him beat the highest paid guard in all of football, Peter Skoronski, for that sack of Cam Ward that was nullified by the penalty. But he made several plays, Halton did, against the run. There was initially, I think, not fear, but resignation. The 49ers were okay with it, that Gracen Halton would be a pass rush only kind of defensive tackle. But he plays larger than his 293-pound frame would suggest. So you look at Osa Odighizuwa, he's about 290. Gracen Halton is 293. Alfred Collins and C.J. West. C.J. West, who sat out the other day because I think he's going to be a starter for the 49ers. Hopefully there's not an injury situation there. But Alfred Collins and C.J. West are 320-plus pound defensive tackles who will be counted on to stop the run for the 49ers, whereas Osa Odighizuwa and Gracen Halton are 290-pound defensive tackles who are being counted on as pass rushers. The more that you can accomplish outside of your specific box, outside of that specific purview, makes you more valuable as a defensive tackle. So that's where you enter this guy right here. He can both stop the run at 347 pounds. Obviously, he's 30 pounds heavier than Alfred Collins and C.J. West, but he can also rush the passer even more effectively than Osa Odighizuwa and Gracen Halton, being number 2 in pressures over the course of the past 2 years behind only Dexter Lawrence, who just got traded to the Bengals and paid by the Bengals. So, of course, Vita Vea would fit into that group because he's good at everything. Now, you probably would have to lose one of these players. I don't know if Alfred Collins would head over to Tampa Bay in a trade. I don't know if they would want him. There obviously has to still be some value there as a second-round pick who played in the clutch for the 49ers last year. We can't forget about the strip of Kyren Williams against the Rams. Now, it's a new defensive coordinator this year for the 49ers. This is, I think, with Raheem Morris, there is more focus instead of length at defensive tackle. There's a focus on length on the perimeter at the exterior rushing positions, on the second level at all of the linebacker positions. We talk about the fever back. And I think that there's a very, very concerted focus on low center of gravity stoutness, not to be confused with Upton Stout, who's also a key member of this defense, but real fire hydrant presence in the middle at defensive tackle. Because if you're going to be running more 3-4 stuff, then you really, really need that nose tackle position to be of the block gobbling variety. C.J. West, sitting in street clothes the other day, will confirm today that he's not dealing with a minor injury, but I suspect that C.J. West has already been penciled in as one of the 49ers starters, and they didn't need to see him out there on Thursday against the Tennessee Titans. CJ West has added even more width this season to man more 3-4 setups, 5-man fronts. Those are all related for the 49ers as a nose tackle. So, just by the simple explanation of things, when you're running a 4-3, you have 2 defensive tackles. When you're running a 3-4, you really only have 1 defensive tackle. Now, the ends are going to be a little bit bigger in a 3-4 because you have fewer defensive linemen, so you're trying to make up for that with greater mass at every single position. So you're going to want a little bit more size in the ends. You also could run a 5-man front where you're running lighter guys who are essentially linebacker hybrids, but they're right on the line of scrimmage. And essentially you're trying to replicate the total amount of mass that you had in the 4-3. But if you're running a pure 3-4, if those 2 outside linebackers are, definitely giving roving threats and they can drop into coverage, they're lighter, you're going to want the 3 down linemen in that 3-4 to be heavier, especially the tackle, because you've essentially replaced one of the defensive tackles with an outside linebacker. So the 49ers are looking at CJ West and telling him, we need you to be an absolute stalwart fire hydrant in the middle. They would also potentially be able to look at somebody like a Vita Vea and say, you can be our stalwart fire hydrant in the middle. This is a scheme agnostic player. This is somebody that can fit in a 3-4 or a 4-3. He could fit anywhere because he's a unicorn. Just like Raheem Morris is a scheme agnostic defensive coordinator because he's somebody that can coordinate a 3-4. He's done both. He's presided over a 4-3. He's presided over a 3-4. He's going to attempt to bring principles from both to the 49ers this year. Now, what would it cost? That's the question, because right now Tampa Bay is saying that they don't want to trade this guy. Obviously, you want to hold a hard line at the moment because the trade deadline is not until November. You have a lot of leverage as a team because if a player does not play, he doesn't get paid from week 1 to whenever he decides to ultimately play. It currently is a hold-in for Vita Vea, so he's not being fined $50,000 a day. Those fines are now mandatory under the new CBA, so the way around it is for players to show up and hold in instead of hold out. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have to pay Baker Mayfield, and I think that's at the center of a lot of this problem. All these teams have limited salary cap space, the 49ers included. 49ers might have the most in the league this year, but they don't have the most in the league in 2027, 2028, 2029, and their costs all escalate. So they're trying to save as much money this year to carry over that unused space in the next year. So you're always budgeting with care. Vita Vea, being a unicorn from Milpitas High School that you see up there on the screen, he might be somebody that encourages you to push that budget a little bit. Now, I don't know if he wants $30+ million per year, or if he would take a hometown discount. If he would say, hey, if you trade me to the 49ers, I'm near my family, I'll take in the mid-20s. I probably want something close to $30 million per year. I think on the wrong side of 30, it might be tough to really argue for the very top of the market at $38 million per year, but Vita can ask for what Vita wants. Vita is still, again, a unicorn, one of the most impactful players against both the run and the pass in the league. It just might pull the 49ers out of any sweepstakes. Now, Tampa's willingness to trade him has to be there. And I think that Tampa, if they continue to not be able to get anything done, and right now it doesn't seem that it's moving toward any sort of resolution there, it will become increasingly stupid of Tampa Bay not to truly engage in trade talks, because the guy's contract is going to expire after next year and he's going to be a free agent anyway. Yeah, you can get compensatory pick for him if he leaves in free agency, but the best you're going to get is a 4th rounder in that case, right? So when it comes to Tampa Bay actually wanting to maximize return for Vita Vea, unless they're trying to push all the chips into the middle of the table now, a disgruntled player may not even help them as much as they want if he's not going to play, if he's going to continue to sit out. But if you want to maximize the return for Vita Vea, you trade him sooner rather than later, or at least ahead of the deadline. So we'll see if Tampa Bay is moved off of their position. We recently saw Dexter Lawrence go from the New York Giants to the Cincinnati Bengals for the cost of a first-round pick. No, it ended up being number 10 overall, right? So that was pricey. Lawrence, though, a slightly younger player than Vita Vea. He also had more time left on his contract than Vita Vea. So the price there was significant. Would it require a 1 to get Vita Vea, or would a second-round pick be enough? If you start talking about including players, and I know that we've discussed Alfred Collins a lot. I know fans aren't that happy with his performance in week 1 of the preseason, so that's a name that's going to come up now, I'm guessing, in 49ers trade rumors and all that. But if you toss in a player that Tampa Bay likes, that's another prerequisite. You can't just, the funniest thing ever is the fans who tell me, oh, just send them Brandon Ayuk, and they'll send Vita Vea back. Guys, Brandon Ayuk is not worth anything to the 49ers. He's also not worth anything to any other team because the guy doesn't want to play football. So you can't just offload your liabilities and expect assets to come back in return. I know that you can override a fair trade mode on Madden on a video game. I know you can turn that off and have anything that you want happen, but that's not real life. So you can't just offload players whom other teams might consider to be liabilities. And I'm not just limiting this to Brandon Ayuk, but another team can consider Alfred Collins to be more of a liability than an asset, right? Another team can consider Nick Martin to be more of a liability than an asset. They may not just want those particular players. You can't just hope that since they don't fit your system, you can send them away and they'll be part of what pays for a player who fits everybody's system in Vita Vea. It's not fantasy land like that. So in all likelihood, you're going to have to send some significantly valuable draft capital over to Tampa Bay to even get them to budge off of their current position of not wanting to trade Vita Vea. Is that a second-round pick? Is that a third-round pick plus a player? Are they going to hold out for a first-round pick and say, if we don't get a 1 this year, we're fine. We're going to contend with Baker Mayfield and company. And then if he walks in free agency, we're fine with getting a 4 for Vita Vea this year. I mean, Tampa can save some money this year if they can ship off his contract to somebody else because they still do owe him some money on the final season of this deal. So it's all part of multi-team calculus. The 49ers have to decide whether or not they're willing to absorb a premium defensive tackle contract. They already have one in Osa Odighizuwa. Is he on this list? No, Osa Odighizuwa is not on this list. No, yeah, he is. He's at the very bottom. You could see him right above Vita Vea, actually. Osa Odighizuwa is making $20 million a year. Now, the 49ers have Osa at a little bit of a discount because Dallas paid his signing bonus. So the 49ers don't actually have to pay Osa $20 million per year. It's a little bit less for San Francisco. They even restructured his contract this year to lower the salary cap hit in 2026. But it still would be major investment in the defensive line. You consider also the fact right now, the 49ers are in this interesting spot with Nick Bosa. Bosa is entering essentially the final guaranteed year of his contract. So Nick Bosa, I would think, is going to want a new deal, especially if he shows up and he plays really well this year. Bosa will be in position to maneuver to the top of the edge rusher market if he delivers a vintage Bosa season. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that's going to happen, but it is a contract year for Nick Bosa. I know that we look at defensive tackle pay in a different bucket as defensive end pay on over the cap on websites like this, but the 49ers probably look at it a little bit more cumulatively for their entire defensive line. Bosa's no longer at the top of the market, but if there's a chance that he reapproaches the top of the market and you want to keep him around with another mega deal after this season, you already have Osa Odighizuwa at a fair rate, but one that's high, right? I mean, it still is a premium pay for Osa Odighizuwa. And then you add Vita Vea. Well, all of a sudden you'd be looking at spending more on the defensive line than any team in football. And you already have a quarterback who is making, $53 million a year in Brock Purdy. Obviously, you've got expensive blue chip players elsewhere. Some of those guys eventually are going to come off the books, but right now the 49ers are the most expensive offense in all of football. The defense has obviously gotten cheaper, but this would mark a pattern of reinvestment into that defense that really we haven't seen I guess a little bit with Osa Odighizuwa, they did re-up Fred Warner to be the highest paid linebacker in the league, but the offense has been getting the majority of the big ticket spending as of late. The defense had been cutting some of these veterans, relying a lot on the NFL draft, 5 straight picks to open the 2025 draft. More defensive players came here in 2026. So it would be a fundamental reinvestment into defensive veterans if they were able to pull off a move like this for somebody like Osa Odighizuwa. As you can kind of see in the background, beautiful morning here in San Francisco. 49ers practice a little bit later today. Practice starts in an hour and 20 minutes, 11:50 a.m. at the 49ers team facility. I want to get you caught up on all of the news. Then we could talk a little bit more about that defensive tackle position. But the 49ers tried out 3 cornerbacks yesterday. Remember that there were 2 injuries at cornerback. 1, Jack Jones, hand injury, exited the preseason game against the Titans. 2, Nate Hobbs has a groin injury. He's going to be out a few weeks, according to Kyle Shanahan. So the 49ers tried out 3 veteran corners on Friday. Bryce Hall, Corey Mayfield, and Troy Pride. They will almost certainly sign one of these guys over the course of the next 2 hours. And one of those guys is going to be in a 49ers uniform for practice at 11:50. To help visualize that, we can go back to the roster. Here we are, Jack Jones. Now we have to also shade Nate Hobbs in with an injury. So you can see this cornerback position. The depth right there is now being really, really tested. Saron Neal's been playing safety a little bit more than cornerback. I'm even going to move him down here. So to give you an idea, corner right now, obviously of Lenore, Green, and Stout. They, though, are starters. The 49ers aren't going to give them a whole lot of time in the preseason. Ephesians Prysock, he made a really nice play. It might have been a hold. They didn't call it, though. But they're on the goal line against Carnell Tate, the play before Pollard ran into touchdown. We saw the arm length of Ephesians Prysock. You know, anytime I talk about wingspan and arm length, I like to go like this. It doesn't fit in the frame, but neither would Ephesians Prysock's wingspan. I mean, guy's a long corner. I guess we can categorize him in with the long rookies the 49ers have added in Jaden Duggar, Larry Worth, and Romello Height. But, I mean, he's a rookie. He's still developing. It was a nice play against Carnell Tate, the top receiver pick in this 2026 draft. And Ephesians Prysock has a lot of experience, too, started all 4 years in college. So he has a chance to make a splash sooner rather than later for the 49ers. But I think right now they're making sure he still gets some seasoning. With Jones and Hobbs currently on the shelf, the 49ers will have an opportunity to give young players like Ephesians Prysock even more reps. Young player like Jacob Robinson, he had the interception against the Titans, second-year guy on Tuesday in the joint practice, and then he had a blitz, a nice blitz, and he was in on a few tackles on Thursday in the preseason opener. Darrell Luter Jr., lame duck year of his rookie contract, and they brought in Eli Apple, and maybe they keep Eli Apple now for a little bit longer since both Jones and Hobbs are hurt. But Eli Apple is a veteran cornerback whom the 49ers have signed to bridge the gap until they get some guys back. And we'll likely see one of the 3 tryouts the 49ers had in yesterday. Again, Hall, Mayfield, or Troy Pride join the team today to fill out this cornerback room. Now, the defensive tackle room, they've been blessed so far. You can knock on wood with really good health. Both Bryson Eason and James Thompson Jr., by the way, were, I thought, very good for the 49ers on Thursday. Eason and Thompson are different types of players. Thompson, a little bit more of a pass rusher. He had that sack in conjunction with Larry Worth. So you saw some length at play for the 49ers there. Thompson is 6'6", pass rushing type, made his way through the pocket. And Larry Worth, another fever back candidate, linebacker at 6'4", found his way in there, and who was it? Did they get Will Levis at Levi's Stadium? It might have been Levis later in that game, but that was a sack. Eason, a little lower to the ground, and as I've been talking about, that fits with what the 49ers, I think, have been profiling for at defensive tackle, but he also played well for San Francisco. Sebastian Valdez. Now, this is one, somebody said he reminds me of Cowboy, of Justin Smith, and I could see it in how strong he is. I mean, Valdez put up over 30 bench press reps. It's one of the strongest defensive linemen, period, of the draft when he came out in 2025. Yeah, he was last year's class. But he is extremely athletic as well. It's crazy that this guy was an undrafted free agent because of the physical profile that he brings to the table. The reason he was is because one might consider him slightly undersized, but the strength and the explosiveness, which allowed him to play on kick coverage for the 49ers, he made a tackle on kick coverage despite being held the other day. They threw a flag for holding, and Sebastian Valdez made the tackle. 2 plays later, he was in on a run stop. It was a tackle for loss. I mean, the 49, we know they love him because of how they treated him last year. He was on the practice squad, but they called him up even though he wasn't going to play. They made him inactive just to give the guy a pay raise. That was really cool. Speaking of that, my editor who writes our great newsletter at the San Francisco Standard, Kerry Crowley, had a great little newsletter the other day, pointed out that Curtis Rourke might have secured himself a good $600,000 on Thursday. Why? Well, because if he played poorly and the 49ers said, we can sneak you through to the practice squad, your salary for the year is between $200,000 $240,000. Curtis Rourke, if he makes the 53, as I think is a foregone conclusion at this point, based on what we saw from him the other night, he's going to make about $880,000 this year. So the difference between the practice squad and the 53-man roster salary is about $600,000. Somebody like Sebastian Valdez, 3 times last year, the 49ers gave him a 53-man roster game check instead of a practice squad game check just because they could, because they wanted to reward him for how good of a look he was giving the 49ers at practice and scout team. I mean, he was a stud for San Francisco in practice last year. They wanted to keep him happy, reward him, keep him around. Good morale leads to better results. And I think this year, Sebastian Valdez, I now have him on an inside track to make San Francisco's 53-man roster. Pie in the sky, though, if Tampa wants to trade Vita Vea and the 49ers have a package that works and they can find something that works contractually for somebody who grew up so close to their stadium. At Vita Vea, here, one thing about the unicorn. Let's get the unicorn back up on the screen. One thing about him, if you go and watch Vita Vea's highlight tape in high school, so that's playing in the Bay Area, there's a game playing against Palo Alto High School, so even closer to where I am right now in San Francisco than Milpitas. Milpitas is right by Levi's, though. He's playing running back in high school. This guy that's up on the screen is playing running back in high school. And as you might imagine, it goes poorly for those who try to tackle him. When one of the largest NFL players ever, I think the largest right now, or close, not, there's some offensive tackles that might weigh a little bit more, but one of the largest players in the league, let's just put it that way. When that guy has a history of playing running back and playing it explosively, which he did in high school, you can say, okay, this is special. This is a size-speed combination that we have not really seen in the past. That's what Vita Vea brings to the table. He played running back here in the Bay Area in high school. He dominated people. He was running to the edge. I mean, think of a poor cornerback, especially a high school cornerback, 140 pounds, dripping wet. And then, I mean, Vita wasn't 347 yet, but Vita was still Vita. Imagine him coming around the edge. If you're that high school cornerback, do you want to tackle that guy? Are you going to try? Do you want to risk your life? I don't think so. So you kind of just get out of the way, and then Vita Vea bends the edge and runs in for a touchdown. A lot of that happened in his high school tape, and it's quite humorous to watch. Now there are bigger guys meant to combat Vita Vea, but he still has dominated because he's Vita Vea. Because the metrics for Tampa are crazy. Top 5 run defense in every single season since Vita Vea joined the team in 2018. First-round pick out of the University of Washington. And somebody who's number 2 in pressures behind only Dexter Lawrence since the past 2 seasons, since 2024. So he's really, really good. I'm going to go ahead and answer some of your questions, and then I'm going to head down to practice. We got, 1,000 of you or so watching this. This is good. And I We can talk about anything. I was in that 49ers locker room the other day. I can report to you that Brandon Ayuk's locker is no longer there, replaced by Jake Brendel's locker. So Brendel has moved across the room. Ayuk used to have a spot right at the entryway, the way that you walked in from the stadium, right in the corner. Corner lockers are more coveted because you got more space. And he was right there around that entryway in the corner. But Jake Brendel has now taken his space. So no more locker for Brandon Ayuk in that 49ers room. They've redone that entire locker room. The lighting is a little bit different, and the color scheme is a little bit different. The carpet is a little bit different in that 49ers locker room. Well, they had to after the Seahawks smoked it out following the Super Bowl. But I think the renovations were in store anyway. You can no longer get through one of the there's no office in the corner where Brendel used to be. Because that's where the 49ers' new hydro area is. They invested a lot in a new pool and a bunch of new hot tubs. That's what the players found lacking, I think, when they did the player survey. But the 49ers have now, in their attempts to be better off with some of these injuries and take care of their guys' bodies at a more efficient level, they have redone the hydro areas in the 49ers locker room. Tommy says that Ephesians Prysock is a stud. Yeah, he is really good. No, he didn't get any reps at safety. I don't know why you'd give a guy who has that kind of coverage capability reps at safety right now. I mean, he's very, very capable at cornerback. And until it is shown that he can't hang with these guys at the NFL level, corner is the more valuable position to be at because you could take advantage of him on a man-to-man basis much more often at corner with that length. I mean, think Richard Sherman, right? 6'3", long arms. Ephesians Prysock, 6'3", also very, very long arms. Somebody asking about the injuries with Hobbs and Jones. I don't know what Jones's injury is. I think it might be a fractured hand. He left with a hand. That's all I know. I just don't know if it was sprained, fractured. That usually is something you could put a club on, and he might be able to be back sooner rather than later, unless it's a specific type of fracture that you can't return with. For Nate Hobbs, it's a groin strain, so it's going to be a few weeks for Nate Hobbs. Prysock, Duggar, and Halton played well. Yeah, I mean, all three of those guys really, it was a fun game to watch the 49ers rookies. You know, if we just go to the roster, we can take Vita Vea off the screen for the time being. If we go here and just look at the green color codes, you can see, and, you know, we could, do I have Dejon Stribling? Yeah, right here, green color code. Unfortunately, no Kalon Black because he was hurt. He's got the adductor, but we saw Dejon Stribling. Awesome. Became only the second player over the past decade to catch 7 passes in a preseason game in fewer than 20 minutes of that preseason game. He played for fewer than 20 minutes, caught 7 passes, 63 yards. Looks great. Good news for the 49ers. We saw 22 snaps of Enrique Cruz Jr. I have to still watch the tape back a second time for the offensive linemen to have really, really firm judgments, especially on the guys who played a little bit later on. So we'll have a show talking about Enrique Cruz, 49ers rookie tackle, in a little bit. I did watch the defensive linemen multiple times already. Gracen Halton, epic. I mean, the fact that he's stopping the run, and that was the Titans' first-team defense, it's huge for the 49ers. That's massive for San Francisco because they're going to be able to keep him out on the field more than they thought. Promising starts for James Thompson Jr. and Bryson Eason. I think you, at the very least, want to keep both of those guys on your practice squad. Now, how things shake out with the 53-man roster is still to be determined. We still have to figure out exactly how Alfred Collins is going to fit into this. I think that C.J. West is a starter for the 40. You know what? I'm going to move C.J. West up here. Because unless they tell me that there was a minor injury when I go down to the facility today, it seems to me that he's ahead of Alfred Collins on the pecking order. So we'll move Alfred Collins down. I think it's West and Odighizuwa as the 49ers' 2 starting defensive tackles in a 4-down front. Collins, Halton, obviously, stock rising. And I moved Sebastian Valdez, and I think as of right now, if there were a cut down today and the 49ers weren't allowed to make any moves outside of, who you carry on the 53, I think they carry 5 defensive tackles. So I have Sebastian Valdez on the 53-man roster picture. Jaden Duggar, awesome with that length, that closeout speed. He also had a tackle for loss, which was really big against the run. But how he chased down Cam Ward with the 7-foot wingspan and the speed, I thought that was revelatory. And then we saw the pass breakup from Ephesians Prysock. Nice stuff from Larry Worth as well over here on the right. Didn't really get to see as much. It was more third-team action for Will Pauling and Wesley Grimes, so I cannot upgrade them to guys who I project to make this 49ers roster based on that appearance. But that is what happened in the preseason game. Maybe a couple more questions, and then it's time for me to move on, get some breakfast / early lunch. I guess they call that brunch, and head down to the facility for practice. A lot of questions on, does Valdez make this team? And, it's August 15th. They don't cut this down until after the second preseason or the third preseason game, 2 more to go. Guys probably going to get hurt. That's just how this league works. Stuff will shuffle. Maybe there'll be a trade. Maybe there'll be 2 trades. Maybe the 49ers will bring in Vita Vea. Although the probability of that grows as the season progresses, right? As we get closer to the trade deadline. So we don't know what the number situation is going to be like yet, which is why it's so hard to project this. A lot of people saying, oh, there's no room for Valdez. Well, there might be room for Valdez next week. There might be room for Valdez after this practice. I just don't know. Like the 49ers don't either. So this is going to be a living, breathing situation. The Seahawks and Devon Witherspoon have agreed to a 4-year, $132 million extension with $101 million guaranteed. So the Seahawks rewarding one of their very good young cornerbacks. I'm just doing the quick math on that. 132 divided. That's, wow, $33 million a year for the cornerback. Now, we've always known that Mike McDonald is a secondary primary coach, right? He's majored in the secondary, kind of like Raheem Morris is majored in the secondary. It's just crazy to me to see corners at over $30 million per year. As somebody who covers the 49ers in a team that has definitely put more into the defensive line and the front 7 financially, that's Bosa was at $34 million per year when he signed his contract back in 2023, and that he was the highest paid defensive player ever. There was no cornerback even remotely close to him. Still remember when it was a big deal when cornerbacks crossed $20 million. So to have a corner at $33 million, I mean, that's probably the Super Bowl markup right there. The Seahawks having won the championship last year, but a lot of money going into that secondary. Is that right? Is there more guaranteed there than Brock Purdy? Well, it gives you an idea of how fast these contracts are inflating. Now, Purdy's deal is interesting because it had what I like to call practical guarantees. So Purdy had a lot of money that triggered into a guaranteed in April this year. He's going to have a lot of money trigger into a guarantee early next spring, so on and so forth. If Purdy is on the team playing at a high level, they're not going to cut him. So that money is practically guaranteed for Brock Purdy. So he made this deal, this staggered deal for the 49ers. He didn't care as much about the APY. He could have asked for more than $60 million per year. He didn't. And he didn't, rake the 49ers over the coals for the contract. Good on Brock Purdy. It's been good for the 49ers salary cap situation. We saw Tom Brady do similar things for the New England Patriots multiple times. So it would not surprise me if I have to look at the raw numbers of the deal with Witherspoon, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did have some figures that are higher than Brock Purdy's a couple years after that. Purdy had $181 million in total. So $100 million fully guaranteed. That's the difference. Witherspoon has $101 million total guarantees. Purdy has $181 million total guarantees. So just to clarify, Brock Purdy has $80 million more in guarantees. Do not confuse fully guaranteed money with total guaranteed money. Total guarantees include injury guarantees. Full guaranteed money does not include injury guarantees. We don't know Witherspoon's fully guaranteed money, but it's less than Purdy's $100 million. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.